Brockovich became known for breaking the story of a Southern California town that was poisoned by PG&E.
Well, now she's involved in a similar case in Mendocino County. CBS 5 launched an investigation into how industry may have brought illness to the town of Willets. Roz Plater reports.
Willets, the kind of town where you'd want to raise a family.
I was born and raised in Southern California, and I figured this is going to be a nice place, nice clean air.
That may be what people thought, but it turns out the air in Willets may have been anything but clean. For years, folks saw bright orange-yellow dust around vents in the Remco plating plant, which operated from 1964 to 95. Yellow dust sometimes covered the ground.
You always thought it was pollen on the ground. It was bright yellow.
Remco is in the center of town, next to homes, right across the street from an elementary school. The yellow dust wasn't pollen, but it would be more than 3 decades before anyone would learn the truth.
We raised our two grandchildren there, and this is one of them. The thing is that they couldn't find out what was wrong, so they did an exploratory, and they found a huge tumor on her kidney. I went out to lunch yesterday with my third daughter, and I was looking at her, and I seen a tumor on the side of the head that she didn't want to tell me about.
It wasn't just the yellow dust in the air. Was there something in the water, too? Wildlife in nearby creeks was dying, and the water was sometimes an odd color.
Talk to me about if you knew someone who played in the creek, the same creek that had the dead fish.
We all did.
Our children.
All the kids on our block used to all congregate down there.
CBS 5 Investigates has learned that Remco spilled poisonous chemicals into a creek where the kids played in 1974 and at various times in 81 and 82, among others. One of the chemicals, chromium-6, listed among the most dangerous carcinogens by the World Health Organization. It was not until this summer that folks who lived here finally found out what that yellow powder was. Turns out it too was chromium-6, and the plant had been spewing it into the air for 31 years. More than 3 decades after this all started, the State Health Department finally did a study. Its conclusion, people here are at higher risk for cancer because of their exposure to chromium-6 from the Remco plating plant. Now the people of Willets live in fear of early death because no one told them they were being exposed to cancer-causing chemicals.
I would have never bought a home there. I would never have bought a home there if I'd have known about it.
And I would have never brought my family up here either to live. I thought it was a beautiful atmosphere. Boy, did I mess up.
Now, 656 people are now suing Pepsi Americas, the last existing owner of Remco. Pepsi, though, maintains Willets residents were not exposed to enough chromium-6 to be at a higher risk for cancer. Dana?
Roz, is this kind of exposure unusual?
Unfortunately, it's all too common. Tomorrow night we'll tell you how that happens because any of us could be a victim of this.
All right. Roz Plater, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Well, your chances of developing...
A recent study finds some people in a Mendocino County town face a greater risk of getting cancer because of chemical exposure.
Well, now some wonder why the government didn't do more to protect them. Roz Plater with the results of a CBS 5 investigation into the town of Willets, a town exposed.
If Willets was the company town, then the Remco chrome plating plant was the company.
If you could get on a Remco, then you had it made.
What people didn't know was that the company putting cash in their pockets was putting cancer-causing chromium-6 in the water and soil.
My ex-husband had a kidney removed that was cancerous, and he worked at Remco.
My dad also died from cancer.
I believe 100% that Remco polluted us.
These people believe they're sick because of exposure to chromium-6. After all, Remco employees in the late 70s and throughout the 80s say the plant poured the stuff into the environment literally.
We were dumping dirty coolant, chrome and water mixture.
I was the one that was asked to go out and pull the plug on the bottom of the tank that ran on the ground.
I believe I drove my truck right through here. I kicked all my barrels off in this area. We got the creek running right there. And from the runoff, you know it went down.
Down into creeks where children played. When Remco began chromium plating back in 1964, there simply were no environmental laws. But by 1972, the federal government had adopted the Clean Water Act, and states were supposed to make sure their waterways were kept clean. In the case of Remco, the State Regional Water Quality Board was in charge. Remco had a history of chromium-6 spills throughout the 70s and 80s, even into the 90s. And the chemical ended up in Bechtel Creek. Alan Ramo is professor of law at Golden Gate University.
It's inexcusable. There's clear evidence that they knew what they were doing. They knew the danger. That's why you have criminal laws.
And yet, year after year, Remco continued putting toxins into the environment, and the water department never took criminal action. In fact, it seems it took little action at all. And no one warned the people of Willets about letting their children play in the creek. It wasn't because the inspectors didn't know about the dangers of chromium-6. In sworn statements by water board inspectors in the 70s, John Hannum said he avoided the chrome room because it's poisonous. Tom Dunbar said, "I knew that chromic acid is toxic to people, and I knew that Remco was discharging chromic acid into Bechtel Creek. Chromic acid, which contains chromium-6. Luis Rivera is with the State Water Board. Do you think the Water Board was tough enough on Remco?
Could more have been done back then? I think that the answer is yes.
Finally, in 1983, the Water Board took action. It slapped Remco with a fine, just $2,954.63. Is anybody angry?
If they knew and did it, I'm angry.
The folks in Willets believe that if those charged with enforcing the law had done their jobs, so many people in this town wouldn't be sick today. Now today, the soil and groundwater around Remco are also contaminated. Pepsi America's, the last existing owner, is cleaning it up. Dana?
So the water around the company is contaminated. What about the city's drinking water?
We're told that's not contaminated. The idea here being that they wanted to clean up the groundwater before it actually reaches the water supply.
All right. Ross Plater, thank you. You have more?
Tomorrow night.
Okay, good. Thank you. Britain's Prince Charles.
Many believe environmental laws protect people from exposure to toxic chemicals, but a CBS 5 investigation has turned up evidence to the contrary. The case today in one Northern California town. Roz Plater with a conclusion to a town exposed.
Emergency rooms are supposed to heal people, but Dr. John Sterngold wonders if working in an ER in Willets made him sick.
When I first walked into the hospital, within about a minute, I had the feeling that it was like Freon being poured down my airway, and then it felt like a bottle brush, and then I would cough and cough.
The ER was downwind of the Remco chrome plating plant.
I used to sit facing that window and kind of daydream out the window, looking at Remco, looking at the fog coming out of there.
What Dr. Sterngold didn't know is that Remco was spewing chromium-6 into the air, a chemical known to cause cancer and respiratory problems in humans. A recent state health department study found that people who were in Willets when Remco was in operation from 1964 to 95 are at higher risk for cancer and asthma because of chromium-6 exposure. Today, Dr. Sterngold has lots of time to play his guitar. It turns out he has a form of asthma. And hospital chemicals trigger coughing so brutal, he's broken ribs, and it's cost him his career. Others in this town believe the chromium has made them sick too, and their families.
My mother died of cancer when she was 59. She never smoked, she never drank.
I've watched my children grow up. They have tumors. I've had tumors.
Chromium-6 was classified a carcinogen 30 years ago. 20 years ago, a state scientific panel found no exposure level below which carcinogenic effects would not have some probability of occurring. No safe level. Still, Remco was allowed to spew chromium-6 in the air. How does this happen? Well, in the battle to balance public health and a healthy economy, laws often favor business. Alan Ramo is professor of law at Golden Gate University.
there's a real drive to prosper, to have employment, when there's a real job that's available and an abstract risk or a theoretical risk of a chemical, jobs wins out, business wins out.
And chemicals are allowed to flood the marketplace. When it comes to pharmaceuticals, the federal government requires rigorous testing before any drugs can be sold. But if you think the same is true of industrial chemicals, think again. The vast majority are put into use with little testing of any kind. 1,000 new chemicals hit the market each year, and only 6% of them get any kind of toxicity testing at all. Chemicals that people like us, you and me, might be exposed to. Marilyn Underwood is with the State Health Department.
You need to have a weight of evidence that something is bad to then start regulating it.
So in most cases, chemicals are not tested until someone notices a problem. Take asbestos, which was used in products like floor and ceiling tiles. As early as 1963, scientists were concerned that it might cause lung cancer. Turns out they were right. But the Environmental Protection Agency didn't restrict asbestos until 1989.
I think if people really knew what really goes on with environmental protection, I think they would be outraged, and they should be outraged.
In the meantime, people like John Sterngold wonder if the unregulated chemical market is playing Russian roulette with their health.
It might be valuable for other people to know what has happened to me. Not for me, but for them, because they might be in an analogous situation because of where they work.
With 80,000 largely unregulated chemicals in use today, that may be more likely than you think. In Willets, Ross Plater, CBS 5 investigates.
656 people in Willets are suing Pepsi Americas, the plant's last existing owner. Pepsi America's claim is that there is no case because the state's health study is flawed. John Sterngold is not one of the plaintiffs. Tonight's stormy weather deprived Bay Area stargazers of a rare event, a total